Alright, today we will learn about three types of lines: parallel lines, intersecting lines, and perpendicular lines. Before we learn about the three types of lines, there's some definitions that we need to know. The first one is point. A point is the exact location in space or on a plane. We draw it like this. It's represented by a dot. So that dot is our point, and it's given its name with a letter. So this is point A. We can read it point A. When we write it, we write it as point A. An example of a point is the point of your pencil. So we look at the point of your pencil, it makes a little point like that. So the point of a pencil is an example of a point. The next term is line. A line is a straight path of points that continue without end in both directions. So the line is between points. So this is point B and point C. So this line goes in without end in both directions. That arrow represents that the line is infinite going that way and it's infinite going this way. So the way we read it, this could be line BC, or it could be line CB, because the line could either be going this way or that way. So we can call it line BC or line CB. When we write it, we draw a line on top of the points. So we make line, and then we write the 2 points, BC or line CB. An example of this would be a road, a long straight road would be an example of line CB. The next term that we need to know is line segment. A line segment is a part of a line between two endpoints. So this one, unlike the line, it does not go on forever. It starts here and it stops here. It has an end point and a starting point. Or it can start here and end there. It has an end point and a starting point. So they use the points DE. So this is line segment DE. So we can call it line segment DE, or we can call it line segment ED, because you could start here and go this way, or you can start here and go that way. So when we write it, we make a line and then we write our 2 points at the bottom. So line segment DE. Notice that does not have arrows at the end of these, like that one. If it has arrows, then it's a line. If it does not have arrows, it's a line segment. So this is line segment DE, or we can call it line segment ED. An example of a line segment is the edge of the yield sign. It starts here and it ends here. So this is a line segment. It has a starting point and it has an ending point. So this would be a line segment. So with this side and this side. So we have 3 line segments there. All right, the next term is array. Array is a part of a line that has one endpoint that continues without end in one direction. So arrays is about similar to a line in the it goes without end in one direction. It starts in F and it goes this way through G and all the way in one direction, and it doesn't end. It does not have end in one direction. So it has one starting point, one end point, and then it goes this way. Remember that arrow represents that this line, this ray is infinite going this way. So it has one end point and then it goes without end in one direction. All right, so this one, they use the points F and G. So we can read it ray FG. We cannot say ray GF on this one. We cannot go the other way because the ray is going in this direction. So we can only call it ray FG. And we write it, we draw a ray, and underneath it we name the 2 points, ray FG. And an example would be a one-way road. It starts in one endpoint and then it goes on forever in that direction. So that would be a ray. So those are the terms we need to know before we start talking about the types of lines. All right, so the three types of lines that we're going to learn today are intersecting lines, parallel lines, and perpendicular lines. Right, intersecting lines are lines in a plane that cross at exactly one point. Intersecting lines form four angles. So this is line HI and line JK. So line HI intersects with line JK. So we can read it as line HI intersects line JK at point X. It intersects right at this point, point X. And when we write it, we can write line HI and line JK intersect at point X. So this is line JK and line HI. These are intersecting lines. They cross at one point. Now parallel lines. Parallel lines are lines in a plane that are always the same distance apart. Parallel lines never intersect. So this here is important. They are always the same distance apart. So line DE is parallel to line FG because they don't intersect or they don't touch each other, and they're the same distance apart all throughout. There's the same distance apart here, and they're the same distance apart here. So that makes them parallel. Line DE is parallel to line FG. That's how we would read it. We can write it as line DE is parallel, that's a parallel symbol, is parallel to line FG. This symbol means it's parallel to. So line DE is parallel to line FG. The lines do not have to be the same size. I'm going to get a sticky note so I can show you. All right, if I have two lines that are not the same size, let's say I have this line this long and a line that long, those two lines are still parallel because there's the same distance apart throughout. So that would make them parallel. Even though they're not the same length, they're still parallel lines because they're the same distance apart. All right, now the next line are perpendicular lines. Perpendicular lines are lines in a plane that intersect to form four right angles. They don't always form four right angles. Sometimes it'll be just one right angle or two right angles. But if they form right angles, then those are perpendicular lines. So we have line NO. It's perpendicular to line LM. So when we read it, we go line LM is perpendicular to line NO. Or we can write it as line LM is perpendicular to line NO. Like I said, they don't always form four right angles. This would be an example of a perpendicular line, perpendicular lines. So if I have a line going down straight and a line going across straight, these are perpendicular lines because they make right angles. This angle right here is a right angle, and this angle right here is a right angle. Those are perpendicular lines. Sometimes perpendicular lines only make one right angle. So if I have a line going down and a line going across, they make an angle there. That's a right angle. Those are also perpendicular lines. We could extend this line, it would go that way, and extend this line, it would go that way, and that would make four right angles. So that would also be a perpendicular line. All right, so now that we know the three types of lines, now I'm going to show you some of the lines in our geoboard. This is a geoboard. Geoboards have pegs on them, and we use rubber bands to represent lines. So the first lines that we're going to use in our geoboard are parallel lines. So parallel lines are lines that are the same distance apart and they never intersect. They don't touch each other. So I'm going to start with a line right here. So this rubber band represents one line. So we have a straight line going across this way. Now if I have another line right here, so that would make them parallel lines, because this line is the same distance apart throughout as this line. They never intersect, they don't touch each other, and they're the same distance apart throughout all these points. So that would be a parallel line. Remember that the lines don't have to be the same size. I can have a line that size, like shorter line, and a longer line. They still be parallel because they're still the same distance apart throughout. So these two lines are parallel lines. Remember, they have to be the same distance apart. All right, so now if I had this line going this way and this line going that way, even though they're not intersecting, they're not touching, they are not parallel lines. These two will not be parallel lines because they're not the same distance here and here. This is a shorter distance, and that is a much longer distance than this. So these would not be parallel lines because they're not the same distance apart. Parallel lines have to be the same distance apart. So these two are parallel lines. And they don't have to be going sideways. I can make a set of parallel lines going this way. That is a set of parallel lines. They're the same distance apart throughout, and they're straight lines that don't meet. These are parallel lines. Remember, they don't have to be going this way all the time. They can go up and down. They could even go sideways and be parallel. As long as the two lines are the same distance apart, they would be parallel. Actually, those would not be parallel. This would be parallel. There we go. So those two lines are parallel lines because they're the same distance apart. These two lines are the same distance apart and they never touch each other. So those are parallel lines. So I showed you 3 ways to make parallel lines. So now we're going to write our parallel lines on our paper. We're using lines and angles 1. So we're going to go to A. A, we're going to write parallel lines. So we're going to draw some parallel lines, and then we're going to write the parallel lines. So first we have to make parallel lines here. So if I go from this point all the way to that point, that is one line. And if I go from this point to this point, there's 2 lines. So those are 2 parallel lines. So now we're going to name the top one. We're going to put arrows because these are lines. And an arrow at this one. And we're going to name this line, line A. So this would be line A. And this would be line B. So line A is parallel to line B. These two are the same distance apart and they don't touch. So that is a set of parallel lines. At the bottom, we're going to label this as a parallel line. So this would be parallel. So those are parallel lines. So now we have B, C, and D. So we can go ahead and make parallel lines of B, C, and D. So now we're going to talk about another set of lines. So the next set of lines that we're going to talk about are intersecting lines. Intersecting lines are lines that cross at one point. So I'm going to get my geoboard again, and I'm going to make some intersecting lines. So intersecting lines are two lines that cross at one point. So I'm going to make, I guess I can go here. So I'm going to make a line here. So this represents one line. We'll call this line B. And I can make another line. I'm going to make another line going right here. So let's call line C. So line B is intersecting with line C. And it makes four angles. There's an obtuse angle, an acute angle, an obtuse angle, and another acute angle. So these are intersecting lines. Lines that cross each other at one point. They cross each other right here. So those are intersecting lines. I can make a variety of intersecting lines with this rubber band. So if I was to put this here, those would still be intersecting lines. If I was to move this one over here, those will still be intersecting lines because they cross at one point. If I was to move this one over here, those would still be intersecting lines because they cross at one point. So intersecting lines are two lines that intersect at one point. If I was to put them this way, then they're no longer intersecting lines because they're not crossing. So remember, intersecting lines have to intersect in one point. So line B and line C are intersecting lines. So, all right, so now we're going to go back to our paper, and we're going to find the square E. And we're going to make a pair of intersecting lines. So we're going to make a line, let me think. All right, why not? We'll make one right here. We're going to go across. And we'll call that one line X. So we'll put an arrow at the end. And then I put an arrow at this end. And I'm going to put an X up here, because that's line X. So now I'm going to intersect with line W. So I'm going to make a line going from this point to this point. And again, I'm going to draw an arrow because this is a line. And we'll call this line W. So line X is intersecting with line W. So those two lines are intersecting lines. So let's label this intersecting. Those are intersecting lines. Line X and line W are intersecting lines. So let's learn about the last kind of line that we're going to learn about today here. The last kind are perpendicular lines. Perpendicular lines are lines that intersect and form right angles or corners. We're going to take our geoboard and we're going to make perpendicular lines. All right, so perpendicular lines are types of intersecting lines because they touch each other. But these are going to form right angles. Right angles are corners. So if we look at our sticky note here, this is a right angle. This corner right here is a right angle. So whenever we want to see if something is a right angle, we can always use the corner of one of these post-it notes. So I'm going to create an perpendicular line on my geoboard, and then I'm going to show you how to measure it with a post-it note. So I'm going to make one line going down, and I'm going to make one line going across. I'm going to put it towards the middle then here. All right, so now we have, let's call this line X and line Y. So line X and line Y are perpendicular lines. They intersect right here in the middle. So we take our post-it note and we put it right here. If you notice, right here, trying to get it to where it doesn't move. Right here in the middle, it fits perfectly in there. This is a right angle, a 90-degree angle. So if the two lines form a right angle, then those two lines are perpendicular lines. They're intersecting lines, but they're a special kind of intersecting lines because they form right angles. So this would be an perpendicular line because it forms a right angle. If I was to move this one way over here, those would still be perpendicular lines because we still form a right angle right here. So this line and this line form a right angle. Line X and line Y form a right angle here, and it forms a right angle down here. So those would be perpendicular lines. Perpendicular lines, like I said, form right angles. If I was to move this line to the bottom, those would be perpendicular lines because they form a right angle right here and form a right angle on this side too. If I was to move this line to the top, those would still be perpendicular lines because they form right angles there, and it forms a right angle here. So it forms that corner right here and this corner right here. So that would be a perpendicular line. All right, so now we're going to write our perpendicular line on box I. So we're going to create a perpendicular line. So I'm going to make a line, let's make it right here. And we'll call this line, you know what, we'll make a line segment. So this one's a line segment. Line segments don't have arrows on it at the end. So this is line segment, and let's call it J. Line segment J. And I'm going to make another line segment going down right here. And we'll call that line segment L. So line segment J and line segment L are perpendicular because they make a right angle right here. I'm going to try to make this line a little bit more straight. All right, if we take our sticky note, it'll fit perfect right there. So that's a right angle, and it'll fit perfect right here. So that's a right angle. So these are perpendicular lines because they form right angles. So if it forms a right angle, it's a perpendicular line. It's a special kind of intersecting line. So we're going to label this as perpendicular. Perpendicular lines. So these are the three kinds of lines that we have. We have parallel lines, intersecting lines, and perpendicular lines. So on our paper, on this column, we're going to make parallel lines. On this column, we'll make intersecting lines, and this column will make perpendicular lines. So these are all going to be parallel lines. These are all going to be intersecting lines, and these are going to be perpendicular lines. I made these three, so yours, try not to match mine. Make intersecting lines that are different looking than mine. So on this column, we're going to draw all parallel lines. On this one, it'll be all intersecting lines. And on this, it'll be all perpendicular lines. And that's it. Once you finish your lines, we're done.